Alright, my name is Emilio,
My name is Homero.
and for this episode of our podcast, we're going to be talking about our interview with Miss Minhades.
At the time, Miss Mijares was in the 6th grade. She stated that she was in the East Coast, so around the time it was early in the morning when the first tower got struck. She stated that she was in the 6th grade, and it was in the middle of class where her teacher had pulled out a TV and started playing the towers being struck.
She didn't really realize what happened at the time since she was just in 6th grade. As she grew older, she realized the full scope of what happened, of the impact of the planes hitting, and how our national security was being threatened, and how in our response we definitely overstepped what we should have done.
She specifically stated that she wasn't entirely directly affected, nor were her loved ones affected, but she did mention how her privacy, and I think overall people of the States, their privacy was just reduced because of the towers being hit.
And with the privacy being less secure was due to the Patriot Act, which would in that allow any police department to share information with any foreign countries in order to gain intel on potential terrorists and terrorist groups, while also potential discrimination against people due to falsely accusing them as terrorists, as police officers were able to deem someone as a terrorist and arrest them on the site, which Minhades wasn't exactly scared of, but was aware of how much it happens and how much it correlates to now and how immigration works now.
Right. And pretty sure that also goes back to how planes and flights and just air travel in general was like completely changed. Not entirely sure if it was for the better, but I feel like definitely makes things a lot more safer, but also it could like just affect someone by like falsely accusing them, and as well as how like overall the 9/11 attack, it probably affected a lot of people who were like I guess dealing with the racism because of the attacks.
My name is Emilio.
My name is Uriel.
For this episode, we're going to be talking about Clark's interview.
Yeah, for me, I noticed that there was a lot of overlap between Clark's and Miss Minhades's, especially because they're so close together in age. And one specific thing that I noted was the airports, and how there's a lot more increased security between them.
As Mr. Clark grew older, he also had the same aspects, while he gained them more through college and courses opposed to Minhades's. He also learned more about how Muslim hate was being enacted and treated, with news televising hate propaganda against Muslims.
Like how every channel was showing it. And specifically with the Patriot Act, I think everyone was kind of just on guard, especially like between the people and the government, because there's sort of that distrust of like invasion of privacy.
He may have not directly been affected by the Patriot Act as Minhades would due to the different ethnicities, but he does understand how terrible it is for people of color, and how bad it is for specifically how worse generalization has gone, and how micro racism still exists right now. And while he may have not been fully aware of what happened, he did have some little concept during the 7th grade where he just realized like oh wait, if it's being broadcast on every channel, it's probably a big deal. And I think that's the only and like one time he and us in general would experience this sort of attack in our lifetime, and how drastically it impacted us, and how we could learn from the effects that happened from those attacks.
Like how patriotism started to surge after, and how I think for the first time in a while we all came together and agreed on the decision to go to war because their tensions were high, especially between countries.
And they both mutually agreed in that us as the USA, regardless of our patriotism, we did overstep what we should have done. And it's not really, it can be justified, but they both don't have shame of being from the soil and being from the USA.
My name's Ethan.
My name's Sammy, and in this episode we're gonna cover Mr. Hayward's interview. So, Mr. Hayward at the time was 40 years old. He was working at a technical college, and then on his way to work, he turned on the radio and he heard that the Twin Towers were struck, and he was in complete shock after hearing that.
In the initial attack, I believe that his sister lived in the area, and he tried to connect with them, but apparently like all lines were disconnected, planes were grounded, and security was more tight. And it kind of took a couple of like days for like everything to come back to normal, or not normal, but like communication lines to be back to normal.
Yeah, but not aware about like security being more strict and stuff. At that time, when he was at the technical college, Mr. Hayward had a student who was interrogated by the police over his race because I believe he was from Yemen, and the policeman, he arrested the student and he took him in for questioning just because of his race and his religion.
Mr. Hayward also saw that the U.S. after the attacks wanted to like get revenge in a way, and so they went after all these Middle Eastern countries trying to find who the attackers were, and that the U.S. they kind of went too far in a way, and like with like the destruction of the 9/11, they kind of destructed more in the Middle East.
Building off what Ethan said about destruction, I feel like Mr. Hayward did have a really good knowledge about the Patriot Act, and I think he believed that I think he believed that the U.S. was doing too much with that, and he said that, I mean, like, of course, because if they're trying to find out who did it, well, I guess, but like going through like people's security and like personal information and stuff, I think he said that that wasn't that necessary to do.
To continue off what Mr. Hayward also said, the U.S. kind of built a bad reputation around themselves too over the attacks, because other countries believed that the U.S. was a protector, but the Middle Eastern countries, after like receiving all that harm and like the world seeing it, they just saw the U.S. as like as opposition in a way.
Alright. Okay, my name's Ethan.
My name is Homero.
This is episode 5.
Final episode.
Final episode of Mr. Mosley.
Mr. Mosley interview. David Mosley. Okay. We interviewed Mr. Mosley a while back. He's actually, I think, one of our first interviews. He's a math teacher at Orange Glen. He's also sometimes an avid teacher. But going back to the interview, Mr. Mosley, at the time of the 9/11 attack, he was just finished high school, 18 years old. He stated that he was in the gym with his brother coming out, and then going back to his car, he heard the attacks was all over the radio. And once he got home, As soon as you turn on the TV, it's the Twin Towers is all you see throughout the TVs.
In the initial attack, I remember in his interview, he said that he didn't really know what was going on and that he was confused. Just like our other interviews, like Hayward and Paulson. At first, they didn't really intake that this was happening because usually the U.S. wasn't really like used to having attacks like this. I mean, terrorism was still around, but like propaganda was being spread, but not like really on U.S. soil. So like these attacks as a whole to like the community of the U.S. and like the citizens, they didn't really understand like the bigger like problem this was happening.
Yeah, a lot of people were shocked and scared. Mr. Mosley, he specifically mentioned how he was scared about the draft because, I mean, a random terrorist attack obviously could potentially cause like a war, and that would lead for the U.S. to need more soldiers. And surprisingly, he made all the conditions. He was 18 years old, and he said that that's one thing he was afraid about, as well as how like who knows what could come next. Right after the attacks, everyone was just so in shock, and they didn't know what was coming next. They didn't know what the U.S. was going to do next. All flights were grounded. No one could fly. Airplane security got more strict. I believe the U.S. itself became more cautious, and yeah, it was really afraid.
Mr. Mosley also mentioned that after the attacks, the U.S. started to go to war, and they kind of wasted like lots of resources that could be used to spend on like our nation, but instead that the resources were being used in order to like fight Iran and Iraq and all the Middle Eastern countries. Those resources.
Yeah, he mainly mentioned how it was seen as like a waste of resources, like how the money we used towards that could have been used somewhere else, as well as how like sort of connecting to what I think it was Mr. Hayward. He had to say something about a prophecy or just like a conspiracy theory about how like George Bush, he had planned all this, and he had just like planned the attack in order to, I guess, make an excuse so that the U.S. can infiltrate and then just steal the oil, which could be true, probably not. Could also make some connections to Paulson, how Mr. Mosley, he specifically mentioned when we asked him how, had this, affected you or affected anyone you know, he specifically mentioned how it didn't affect him directly, but the people in the attacks and the people who caused the attacks, many families were lost. And what I mean by families, I mean like the people who are, I guess, related to the people who died during the attack. They had to suffer the loss of that specific person. So to them, it just felt like they lost a piece of themselves, which is sort of like what Mr. Paulson had said.
And Mr. Mosley also said that something to Paulson and Hayward, that the attacks, the U.S. response was not really a good reputation for their name as a protector of the world, and in that case, their stronger fight towards the Middle Eastern wasn't really any benefit for them, or neither like their reputation as well. And the other countries started to like see them as an opposition, just like what Paulson said about them, how we had no right to go into their land and like take over their land and like destroy it. So like that just showed our nation to be like destroyed.
Pretty weak, yeah. I guess a lot of people think that the U.S. did too much, or like I guess they went too far, but also, if you really think about it, I mean, innocent lives were lost. A lot of people had to, turn to a last resort, just like killing themselves so they don't have to, I guess, deal with the flames or like trying to escape. And really think about it, it's like none of it was ever, I guess, put into like nothing out of it was gained. It was a terrible attack, terrible event that people had to go through, and overall, I guess Mr. Mosley, he did have a lot to say about the attacks, but going back to like the other people we had interviewed, I guess all of it just ties together of how, like, yes, they were shocked, they were scared, they were confused, they didn't understand it at the time. Growing older, they seemed to, it started to make more sense. And Mr. Mosley, being 18 at the time and then going into adulthood, he said that I was just trying to make a living, pretty much. He didn't have exactly strong opinions about the politics behind the 9/11 attack, but he is a U.S. citizen, so he does also, I guess, bear the same burden of being attacked by terrorists.
And in summary, all the people we interviewed, I think Mr. Mosley was kind of unique to us because he was at the right age to go to war, and that he was still like a young adult, so we could like relate to that kind of, and like us being at that age already, if that were to happen, I think we'd all be afraid to. But his uniqueness of like going to war and being at the youngest age to work and everything, I think that like it's kind of
Says a lot.
yeah, it's like significant because damn, I don't know.
There's something to relate to. That's
So just cut that.
That's 8.
We just cut it. That's 8.
42. Alright. 3, 2, 1.
What are we talking about?
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Say your name, Ethan.
My name's Ethan.
My name's Homero.
My name is Emilio.
My name is Uriel.
My name's Sammy.
This is the last section of our podcast where we're going to be talking about the altering views and the emotional aspect and the political aspect between the reason. What the hell?
Bro.
We gotta do that all over again now.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. Yeah, we do.
Cut it out,
No, we
Just cut it
don't.
out. Just cut it out.
Just cut it out.
No, we gotta say our names again then. That's gonna be a
No, we
weird
don't.
clip, yeah.
No, it's not.
Well, just do it again.
No, just keep talking.
Let's keep talking.
Ethan, what's your name?
My name's Ethan.
My name's Homero.
My name is Emilio.
My name is Uriel.
My name's Sammy.
We're gonna be talking about the emotional and political part of the 9/11 attacks and the resulting outcomes. During our interviews, we had Mr. Paulson deliver our emotional aspect.
What specific emotions did Mr. Paulson cover?
Paulson's emotions. So I feel like what Paulson was talking about in his interview, it was more directly based off the community, on how the community felt after the attacks, after he felt after, because what he said he worked at Valley or something like that, and they had a alumni from Valley who served in the military and was killed. I think he said the first few hours of them being deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff like that. And he was just saying that how terrible the school felt, the community felt after hearing that news.
The whole point of them telling us about the student of Valley the alumni of Valley who died, was to show how much a death affects someone and how the 2,000 lives that were lost during the 9/11 attacks, how those 2,000 people weren't the only ones who lost their lives, but everyone else who's related to them lost a piece of themselves and lost how they felt and all the they might have not felt anger, they felt more lost, more confused. But for people who weren't directly affected by that, were angry. They were angry that they were attacked. They were angry that we were attacked. That led to a bunch of irrational moves by the military and a lot of unnecessary deaths in the war of Iraq for information that we didn't have confirmed yet, like people attacking Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran, even though all of the terrorists came from Saudi Arabia. And for Chief Batson's interview,
I definitely think his was more political, and I think that's because he has a lot more experience, especially being a firefighter and the chief, but also because he had military experience at the time. I think they're gonna have different beliefs because they were probably like fighting, they were on reserve, and then at any time they would be called over there to fight. I think there were some people who were ready to fight, like the patriotism.
and between those altering views, there are a lot of different acts. While Chief Batson may have felt more angry, as Paulson said, he felt more angry and wanted to just get whoever did this to us. It was a bad look for the USA in general. As Mr. Paulson and Mr. Hayward said, the USA looks like a guardian country for smaller and less powerful countries among the superpowers. But ever since we attacked Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan, our perspective on how people look at us has changed as a warmonger-filled country, and people who just wish to go out and kill.
Also remember Chief Aston specifically targeting communication. I forgot. I don't know entirely. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I remember it had something to do with the firefighters and how they communicated after the attacks.
I guess services, but on where I said services were able to communicate with each other more often, and that lines they were more. Each services before the attacks didn't really have that communication, but now like after the 9/11 attacks, the community like, as a whole, and like they were together now to answer like problems.
But I just remember about what Paulson said in the interview again. I think he said that he believed that it was a conspiracy, I think, about the president, George Bush, planning the attacks or something like that. And to deploy all these military personnel in the Middle East just for oil.
Yeah, one of the bigger theories that popped up after the attacks was that Bush and Dyke did the 9/11 attacks as an excuse to attack the Middle East. Because at that time, oil was really profitable, and for the USA, we were looking for oil in order to increase the economy. And through that, people believe that George Bush caused the 9/11 attacks just for an excuse to go and invade and take their oil.
It seems like even though Paulson and Chief Batson had different views regarding that, Paulson was more emotional and Batson was more political, I think there's still overlap there because how people reacted with their actions depended on how they felt. And if people felt angry, they definitely would have wanted to go attack the country. And they definitely would have felt that their rights were not being respected, especially with things like the Patriot Act, where the government just, there's like a payoff. Like, yes, there's a invasion of privacy for many, but it does help the U.S. to gain intel on other countries to attack them.
And overall, us as a country and us as a community, the biggest problem that we faced was communication. And the lack of communication we had from during the attacks where the fire department at New York couldn't reach the top of the Twin Towers to know how much people needed help, how to get up there. From the people to the government wondering why we had to attack, why we were being attacked, and why we had to enact the Patriot Act, and communicating anti-Muslim, anti-racial, just hate over a general idea from our government to the public. And with that, it's communication is one of the biggest parts of how to deal with a terrorist attack, and how if we as communities and countries don't communicate, nothing will get solved. There just leads to more deaths and more broken families and more pieces of lives being forgotten and disappeared. Thank you. 7 minutes.
How long does it need to be?